Rutgers football in 2026. We're talking Greg Schiano, Travis Johansson, the quarterback competition, Antoine Raymond, KJ Duff, the whole story here on the Big Ten Huddle presented by FanDuel. We got Zack Gugenheim with us to talk about it all. Zack, let's do storylines, then we'll get into offense, defense, what we're confident in, what we're not confident in, and then we'll finish it off with ceiling and floor, your favorite thing about Big Ten football talk. Storylines first, though, Zack. What are the main storylines, or what is the main storyline that you have for Rutgers football going into 2026?
First of all, way to give a callback to my old podcast with Big Ten football talk there.
There you go.
Like it.
There you
go. Yeah, I think the biggest one, and you've already talked about it in a previous episode, AJ Surace, Dylan Lonergan, who's going to be the starter. I think that's maybe the biggest storyline. And then I think a second storyline, last year the defense, Greg Schiano's calling card, no bueno. Can they get back to the Schiano standard?
I will say
two big.
Oh, sorry. I thought you were done.
Those are two big storylines.
Oh, I will say I think the defense got better when Greg Schiano started calling it. The defensive line was still, a weakness there. So that does give me hope for Nebraska, for Rutgers this season. We're doing Nebraska after this. So for Rutgers.
They're both red.
We have too many red teams in the Big Ten. But yeah, I could go on a different tangent. Anyway.
We're going to keep this under 20 minutes. Let's go.
I'm thankful the Rutgers fans are probably our most casual following here on this channel because they're probably laughing with us a little bit. If this was like a Michigan episode, they'd be like, talk about Michigan. So, which I'm not saying is wrong either way. Anyway, I'm just going to shut up before I insult more of our listeners. However, I do think that, going into this season, Greg Schiano, he has this guy, Travis Johansson. It took a long time to get him. I mean, I think it was the longest coordinator open position this year. And they get Johansson in. They went out. They got a few guys on the defensive line. I actually like Rutgers' defensive line haul more than quite a few teams in the Big Ten, what they got through the transfer portal. So I feel good about that. But overall, this is a defense that does need completely revamped. We'll see what Travis Johansson can do. And we'll also see, did KJ Duff and Antoine Raymond make the right decision coming back? These are two guys who had a really good season last year, and they're coming back. No Ethan Kaliak-Manis, no why am I forgetting wide receiver's name last season?
Ian Strong. No, Ian Strong. No, DT Sheffield's gone. Yeah.
Exactly. So it's really the KJ Duff, Antoine Raymond show with whatever quarterback happens here. So we'll see. Going to be very interesting season. Zack, as we look at the offense, because the offense was a strength of this team last year, what is your position group that you are most confident in going into the season?
This might be a cop-out, but I'm going to say the skill positions in total, which I think it's a second year in a row to say that, but it has not been always the case, right? I think they've had good running backs for sure, but KJ Duff is a stud. He is a bona fide NFL guy, 6'6", 225 pounds, like top 3-round wide receiver, I think. Antoine Raymond, we think he might win the Doak Walker. Like, I think he could win that award this year.
Yeah, that's my bold prediction.
Yeah. And I don't think it is far-fetched. Like, I think he could be that dynamic. And I think the receivers, while I don't think they're going to be as good collectively as a year ago, like Ben Black, I think is a good player. I think he might shine in that number 2 wide receiver role. Jordan Houston comes in. He played, most likely going to be that third wide receiver that they have in there. But I think they have a number of weapons in that receiver room that, unlike years past, I think they actually have quite a bit of talent in that room. And then I think an underrated position group here, too, is tight end. Logan Blake played for that. He's played the past couple years for them. Logan Blake's a big boy, 6'6", 265. But then they also get Cameron Anthony out of Ball State, and I think he's going to be good. Phil Steele, actually, I think is pretty high on him as their second tight end. So I think their skill positions collectively is where I would lean their strength is.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of optimism for the skill positions. I feel very good about them as well. Just to, do something a little bit different. Not saying I disagree with you, but to do something a little bit different. I'm obviously most confident in Antoine Raymond, but I would say that another reason why I'm very confident in him is because of Kwabena Asamoah on the offensive line. Best guard, one of the best guards in college football. He has 25 consecutive starts at right guard. ESPN's second team All-American after the 2025 season and preseason. First team All-American by Pro Football Network. So this is an offensive lineman that's pretty underrated in college football. I don't think if you ask very many college football fans who's one of the best right guards in the nation, they're probably not naming Asamoah, but here on the Big Ten Huddle we do because we know our Big Ten football. But I feel really good about him, and I think that they have a deep offensive line room around him. So as much as, yes, I'm most confident in Antoine Raymond in the running back room, as I am going to be most years with Greg Schiano and what he continues to do with that room, I also feel extra confident in them because of the deep offensive line room. Even if injuries happen, not saying they will, and obviously, hopefully they don't, I do think this is an offensive line that could remain deep as long as they keep Asamoah healthy and upright. The group I would say I'm least confident in, and I've said this about a couple position groups so far, and I do mean it when I say it. It's more about mystery than anything else, and that is the quarterback position with AJ Serace and Dylan Lonergan. I am not down on either of them. I don't think either of them are going to be terrible or anything like that, but you are replacing a 3,000 plus yard passer with Ethan Kaliak-Manis, and Lonergan was a little uneven at Boston College last season. AJ Serace, he had some nice plays last season when he kind of came up and mop up duty for Ethan Kaliak-Manis, but being a first-year starter in college football is really hard nowadays, especially with as many experienced quarterbacks as there are out there. Drake Lindsey was somebody that we thought was really good last season for a first-year starter, but he was still probably barely top half of the Big Ten quarterback, maybe not even top half, depending on who you ask. People who actually know what they're talking about ask. So it is a little bit of a risk to go with somebody as a first-year starter, but I think Serace might be the more talented quarterback, and if that's the case, you kind of are getting both sides of it here.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting because Phil Steele on his depth chart, at least the version that I got, I think online he updates it. He does have Lonergan as the projected starter, but I think it would be a sign. I think it would be a positive sign if Serace wins the competition because it signals that he's better. And I think that means the ceiling is higher for Rutgers. Lonergan was decent last year. Like 12 touchdowns, 5 picks, completed 67% of his passes. So like it looks good statistically. The problem is when you kind of poke into the numbers a little bit more, 8 of his 12 touchdowns came in 2 games, against Fordham and against Michigan State. And Michigan State, it was a 2 overtime game. So like he had a couple of good games, but then if you dig a bit more, especially as the season went on and they played stiffer competition, against Pitt, he was 9 of 18 for 89 yards. Clemson, 12 of 19 for 117 yards. Notre Dame, 5 of 8 for 29 yards. So he's not even averaging 4 yards an attempt in that game. I think that's where you're like, okay, maybe he was capped by the talent around him at Boston College, but you really hope that Serace can do better. And so I think that should be the hope. If you're a Rutgers fan, you hope that AJ Serace is talented enough to win the job over Dylan Lonergan.
Yeah, I agree. Let's move over to the defensive side of the bar. Where would you say you're least confident in the defense?
It's tough because I think, and again, I think this is maybe more mystery, and maybe it's even a little bit of but I think a combination of mystery and uh, dread from a year ago. I know they got a bunch of transfers in the defensive line, but I feel like I have to see it before I can believe it. So like Jadan Burnett, senior, he's coming over from Tulsa. Second team AAC, not ACC, second team AAC from a year ago. Zaire Angoy played for Rutgers a year ago, so he's back. Kayshawn Griffin, senior, he was there a year ago. Malachi Davis comes over from Toledo. He was third team MAC. All all seniors and juniors. So at least like they've got grown men. That gives me a little bit of confidence, but I feel like I have to see it before I can believe it. And I think if you are not strong up front, if you can't fix that, then I don't care how good your back seven is. I think you're still in trouble. So I'm not saying they are in trouble. I'm saying I need to see it before I can believe it.
Yeah, I have to agree with the defensive line. It is also the area that I am most concerned about. Malachi Davis comes in from Toledo, Jadan Burnett from Tulsa, Rondo Porter from Appalachian State, also used to play at South Carolina, Jaden Lee from Maine, and Sakoa Koma, I believe is how you pronounce it, from Temple. These are not any like big name players from Power Four or at least Big 12 or ACC teams or anything like that. So you're hoping for a good amount of leveling up to the next competition here. But the one thing I will say that does give me some reserve to be concerned about the defensive line here is Dennis Doughton Carter. Him being from Minnesota last season. Minnesota led the Big Ten in sacks, and now he is coming over to coach the defensive line for Rutgers. I think that was a fantastic addition by Greg Schiano. I think Minnesota kind of fumbled him a little bit. I know Minnesota fans were disagreeing with me on that, and they were kind of saying that they didn't think he was all that great. Seems to work okay for Rutgers most of the time when they bring somebody in from Minnesota on over to Rutgers. Ask Kirk Soraka how that's going for him. So I feel pretty good about that, but I just look at the room and I say, this is a complete reconstruction. I'm not necessarily saying it's bad. I'm just looking at it and saying, I don't know yet. Most confident, I would say, is the linebackers. I'm picking linebacker less because I believe it's an elite group and because it's the one defensive room where Rutgers has the best combination of experience, returning talent, portal production, depth. I mean, I think you have all of that here. You have Morrison Allison, who's going to give you really good tackling production, while guys like Walker, Archie, and I think McClary give them a developmental upside as well. So I like what the Rutgers team has with the linebacker position here. We'll see if we can get them into a bowl game this year. We'll talk about that next after you give us your most confident position group.
Yeah, no, I'm with you on that. I mean, the fact that Moses Walker is maybe going to be a backup when he was starting before he was out for the year. Like, I think that's actually a huge sign. Like, and Walker was good last year, so it's not like he was bad and they're like, we got to get another linebacker to replace him. It's you have a good good third and fourth like linebacker in that room that you can rotate. So that in a lot of ways I think has been Rutgers' struggle over the past couple years, if we're being completely honest, is it's not just the defensive mismanagement the past couple years, but it's also like they just haven't had the bodies to replace. They've been so hurt. I mean, I remember we were in 2024, we were saying, could Rutgers get to 10 wins? And obviously that didn't happen, but I think part of the reason why it was kind of dead on arrival was because they kept getting hurt. And so the fact that that linebacker room doesn't just have bodies, but it has, I think, really good players deep down that list gives me a lot of hope for that position group.
Totally agree. All right, Zach, let's look at the schedule here. We got UMass at Boston College, USC, Howard, Indiana at Maryland. Maryland going through some trouble right now. Zahir Mathis, I heard, just got hurt, and I believe he is another defensive starter. I think they're at 2 at this point that might be out for the season. Very unfortunate news for Mike Loxley, but this is not the Fire Mike Loxley podcast. Wait a
minute. Isn't that who I picked? Didn't I pick Zahir Mathis?
I think you did. Yes.
No! I would like to draft somebody else.
Nope. That's how it goes.
Okay. In all seriousness, we feel bad for Zahir. I hope you get better soon.
Yes, prayers for Zahir, and hopefully he gets better. Then you have at Northwestern. It's going to be at Ryan Field, I believe, October 24th. Michigan at Wisconsin, Nebraska at Penn State, finishing it up with Michigan State, and at the end of the season there. So Zach, looking at the schedule for Rutgers, they have a 4.5 win total on FanDuel. Good news is they are favored to go over at -144 on that win total. So looking like a bowl game is definitely possible here for the Scarlet Knights. Zach, when you look at this and you think ceiling and floor record-wise, where are you kind of leaning in those two options?
Yeah, so I'll go floor first because I'd rather give the bad news first. Um, like the floor is like 2-10. If we're being completely honest, like I think UMass is a definite win. I think Howard better be a win. Rutgers better be a win. But with the rest of the competition on the schedule, like there's a lot of teams on here where you could say yes, Rutgers can win, but I think they're not going to be favored in many. Like I don't know if they'll be favored at Maryland. I don't know if they'll be favored at Northwestern. Maybe they'll be favored against Michigan State at home. So like I really think you have to say the floor is 2-10.
I'll go 3-9 for me personally.
Oh, you just had to do that. Okay, explain.
Oh, well, I think that Boston College game is more of a win opportunity than maybe some people are going to give them
That's
credit
fair.
for, since
That's
it's
a good
at Boston College. A lot of people are going to think, maybe not. But I think Rutgers has a better overall team than Boston College, and so I think they should be able to get that win. And if you get 3 wins in the out-of-conference, I mean, yes, USC and Indiana not looking great there. You do get those games at home, though, so for whatever that's worth. And there's aspects of the schedule, like you avoid Ohio State, Oregon, Iowa, and Washington, and then you get USC, Indiana, and Michigan all at home. Rutgers obviously has not won beat a ranked team in a while, so I'm not going to predict that happens, but I do think those are good opportunities there. But then on the other side, that also does make the games that you could win at Maryland, at Northwestern, at Wisconsin. You do get Nebraska at home. Maybe Nebraska's not doing too well there at the end of the season. We'll see what that looks like. We're going to preview them next, Michigan State. So I think there's a path for 6-6 here. I think if things go right and they play well on the road at Maryland and at Northwestern, you could even get to 7-5. But because of the Boston College, UMass, Howard out of conference, and I think they're going to get at least one Big Ten win, I have to go with the floor being 3-9.
That's fair. I think I'm going strictly by where there would be favored, but I think it's because of the talent that they do have. Rutgers has more talent than I think people are giving them credit for.
They definitely have more talent than Boston College.
Yeah, like I will give you 3-9. I'll give you 3-9.
Okay. Record prediction. I mean, we're not locking you in on this, but
did we go ceiling yet?
I gave my ceiling. Did you give yours?
You said 7-5.
Yeah.
Ceiling. Call me crazy. I'll say 8-4.
Okay. Explain.
I know. I was just saying they won't be favored. They won't be favored. They won't be favored. They'll be favored if they are competing with USC and Indiana. And I'm not calling upsets. I just want to be very clear. I'm not calling upsets against USC and Indiana. But I do think with the offensive line being, I think, as good as I think they can be, and you have a dynamic running game, and you have a get-out-of-jail wide receiver, if your defense is at least adequate, I think they end up being a far better team than they were a year ago. And let's not forget, they're 2 plays away or 3 plays away from being 7-5 last year. Right? They were close with Minnesota. They were close with another team too. I'm trying to remember who they were. They were close to beating somebody. Who did they almost beat last year? Penn State. They were. Yeah. I mean, they were a ridiculous play away from beating. They should have beat Penn State.
Yep.
And they were right there with Minnesota. So I think with their schedule, like I think they can beat Maryland. I think they can beat Northwestern. If Wisconsin is falling apart like I'm predicting, no offense, Wisconsin fans, like they'll beat Wisconsin.
Okay.
I think they can beat Nebraska. I think they can beat Michigan State. So like I think they could realistically get to 8-4. But I think my prediction as of now, before doing like my whole schedule, like we'll do that in a couple weeks. I guess maybe in a week. I will go out on a limb and say Rutgers is going bowling this year, and say 6-6.
I had the higher floor than you, but I do not have the higher record than you. I'm going to say my rough prediction at this point is 5-7, but I do think there is a very much so a possibility of 6-6. I'm looking at this. I think they get UMass. I think they get Boston College. I think they get Howard. Boston College is by no means a given, but I do think they get that. And then I think they get either Maryland or Northwestern, which, by the way, if they get that, we could be looking at a 5-3, 4-3. If they get Maryland or Northwestern, you're looking at a 4-3 Rutgers team heading into Halloween, which is pretty good at that point. But I still think you got too much there at the end of the season. I think you can either get Michigan State, Wisconsin, or Nebraska, but I'm not going to project them to get 2 of those games. So I'm looking at the schedule. I think 5-7 is probably where they land at, but we'll obviously see how it plays out, and that's where I'm at right now.
Yeah, I think 5-7 or 6-6 is like the most likely landing spot.
Mm-hmm. All right.
There's too much. I think Antoine Raymond and that offensive line, I think will cure a lot of ills for them. But will it be enough to get them to a bowl game? I think that's the big question.
We shall see. It's going to be a very interesting season for the Rutgers Scarlet Knights. We are going to be rooting hard for the Scarlet Knights. We are big Scarlet Knight supporters on this podcast. And by the way, I always give these guys a shout out because they just do such a great job over there at On3, the Night Report. That's where I get a lot of my Rutgers info at. They do a fantastic job. Mike, Richie, Alec, the whole team over there. Really appreciate them and the good work they do. If you have not checked them out, there's other good Rutgers sites out there too. I don't want to make it sound like there's nobody else, but they just have really good coverage over there, and I really appreciate them. And they've been on the podcast a number of times. I think we've probably had Rutgers podcasters on here more than anybody else. So very, very fun to see that. All right. Hey, we will see you next time on the Big Ten Huddle. Check out our Nebraska preview coming up. We're going to have a Washington preview coming up as well. We'll try to get all these previews out before the season starts. We're looking forward to it. Thanks for listening and watching. Have a good one.